One. Hi, my name is Lauren Hollows, and I am continuing our 2024 Roundtable series, and I'm very excited to have Vanessa from Prickly to Sweet and Katya from Hawkeye Consultancy with me today. For those of you that would have been watching our channel regularly, Vanessa is one of our regulars, but I'm very excited that Katya is going to be coming up on a future episode with her sister, talking all things Hawkeye as well. So, Katya, I will let you start by introducing and talking a little bit about yourself and Hawkeye.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm very excited to be here and to be part of the series. Thanks so much for having me and Alicia in a few weeks' time. And so a little bit about Hawkeye Consultancy. I'm currently the managing director and co-founder, along with my twin sister, Alicia. We founded Hawkeye Consultancy in 2017 and have been very fortunate to grow the company from just the two of us to 12 wonderful staff members, and we continue to grow. And so we help our clients in various different aspects of managing the standards, anything from auditing services, re-registration, acquisitions, change of ownership, and we specialize in DESBIT Queensland funding. We do a lot of validation and we do assessment creation, but that's not our forte. We leave that to the people who are definitely well more equipped, but we can do that, and we would just prefer to stay away from it. We are excited to be here, and thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, DESBIT's a fun, they can be a fun little organization to work with.
Oh, definitely. They have their own interpretations of some words, and they don't seem to let other people know what they are. So it can be a bit of a guessing game, unfortunately.
There's a whole resource of there.
You can actually for a while. You guys know the Divine Miss M, but Vanessa, please, if you would, for those who haven't watched our episodes before, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Vanessa McCarthy. I am an innovative entrepreneur and managing director. The managing director is of our company, Education Compliance Validators. The innovation is Prickly to Sweet. And the Prickly to Sweet system was created to review assessment tools against units of competency, principles of assessment, and rules of evidence, and is a platform that you can upload as many assessment tools as you like, and it reviews in seconds. And we now have a qual feature that looks at staff matrix. So validation is very much our core business, looking at samples of students' work as well, and generally helping providers understand that whole process and providing an independent review of their information and content.
Excellent. And today we are going to be focusing on standard 1.5. This continues on the series. So we have done other series on 1.1, 1.3, and 1.4. And it was interesting because I was talking about 1.3 today. And obviously, I think that to some extent has a lot of crossover with 1.5. So 1.5 is that the assessment system is quality assured by appropriately skilled and credentialed people through a regular process of validating assessment practices and judgments. That's our high level, and then we go into a little bit of detail from there. But with the 1.3, this is kind of the point of the assessment system is fit for purpose, consistent with the training product, and the assessment tools are tested prior to use to ensure assessment can be conducted in a way that is consistent. So it's one of the first times that we've seen within the standards kind of this separation of validation, and based on the way that they've structured it, we're making an assumption about like post-validation, validation of completed assessment tools versus the testing process that occurs prior to assessment tools being rolled out. Some people refer to it as moderation. Some people refer to it as pre-validation. And I think it was referred to as pre-validation in the last set of the draft standards.
Right.
So very interested to hear your guys' just initial thoughts on validation, testing, and what you think this might mean for RTOs or for the auditing process that will happen with RTOs post 1/1/25. Vanessa, I'll start with you.
Sure. So just my quick thing, if you've gone to 1.3, I find it interesting that the actual title of that clause refers to a training product, and the word training really sort of flips in here because they're meant to be increasing the quality of training throughout the whole new standards. But then further in, when you dig in further into those clauses, it specifically refers to the assessment tools. And in our sphere, in my company and product, this is where we're going to sit quite heavily regarding the testing before use, and the fact that it's looking both at a full training product, whereas previously it was referring to the potential of people were talking maybe just one unit of a competency inside a training product over a period of time. So I think people really need to understand how big this might be and whether all units within a training product will be required to be done. So I'd like to see a little bit more information come through on this one. The next part for the 1.1 itself is, and we'll be talking about this, I think is still based on that whole process of validating samples, because it's talking about the outcomes of judgments, when the validation will occur, things like when it's done or how it's done, such as a risk-based, like which one is the highest risk. Then it will talk further about, and we'll get into it, of course, is the people side of it. Like, why are we still focusing on people and not a system? If we're talking about standards, we need to refer to systems, is my first initial thought. We need to move away from people, and the system should have industry competencies, practical understanding, and credentials that could then base your team, your system of validation must have these credentials rather than personal people. But, you know, let's dive in because I love these conversations. It's interesting, isn't it? People pick up bits and pieces, and I can't wait to hear what Katya thinks, whether it's a similar thing or whether she's gone in a different direction.
Well, I actually really like your point, Vanessa, about giving more definition around the volume. What is the magnitude that providers need to look at here? Is it, you know, just one single unit of competency? Is it defaulting what is currently in the fact sheet of, you know, 2 units from every qualification? What does that look like? I think there definitely needs to be more clarity around that component. I was a bit unsure of why they moved or adjusted and the language from that pre-validation to testing, because I think a lot of people were already kind of doing pre-validation or,
Agreed.
you know, whatever that was called. So people were already used to that. And from an auditing point of view, what we see with our clients throughout various different ASCO audits is they're already currently asking for that information, particularly when it's an off-the-shelf product. They want to see where providers are, okay, well, where have you actually reviewed your material? This is an off-the-shelf product. Where have you reviewed it to ensure that it meets all of the unit requirements, but then also contextualized it to ensure that it's suitable to your cohort and your delivery. And they're already asking for that. So I think, yeah, I'd like to see more clarity around the volume, and that definitely needs to be there. And then also potentially around like what's involved for recognition of prior learning. So they talk about an assessment tool, but are they then, and I know an RPL kit is an assessment tool, but are they then expecting, you know, RPL to be reviewed? I think there just needs to be more clarity around exactly what they want to see in an audit. But yeah, I think the AI system, I'm not an AI expert or systems in terms of, I've seen your system, I think it's great. But whether that would be achievable, I think collectively, yes, definitely. I would potentially stay away from just having that, what do they call it? The credential policy. But I think it is important that people have the skills and the industry knowledge. So it's good that they've mentioned that. As well as having TAE, but I do think it could be collective, and everyone's moving to more efficient systems. There has to be a better way of doing it. It is quite a cumbersome process. Like our clients, they're like, oh, you can just validate this unit for me. I'm like, oh, that's pre-validation. We have to check every single unit. We have to check your learning material. You know, that can take about 6 to 8 hours depending on the size of the unit. And then we've got to draft a report while we're doing that. So I think, yeah, it's a big task. So if it can be shortened in any way to help our clients, and also allow them to actually complete those compliance activities. I find a lot of time they go, oh, well, I don't want to do that, not because they don't know how, but because it's too time consuming. So if there are ways that we can allow them to be more efficient, then definitely let's try to utilize them where possible.
And I think, I mean, the AI one's really interesting because and it's very hard at the moment because there is no credential policy that is yet to be released. I think that's probably one of my biggest frustrations with the standards is like, we're looking at part of the picture. We're still not aware of the full picture. But with the AI, it's not just even in relationship to the validation. It's in relation to things like, what happens when we have multi-choice assessments that are getting signed off? Short answer assessments, AI is getting better and better at automatically marking, and to some extent, in some cases, more accurately than a human being is going to be able to do it. So what happens when we've got part of the competencies being signed off by a system? There is very little dealing with that at the moment in relationship to it wasn't even considered within the standards. So I think that understanding like what a system is and how that term system is going to be considered is interesting. What we were saying this morning was 1.3 very specifically in and around testing doesn't mention people having to do it. So it is interesting that certainly that testing that happens beforehand, that doesn't come under the same requirements as the kind of post-validation. And so is that a way for RTOs to kind of turn around and go, well, we've got this pre-testing system where it's, run through an AI, it's run through a tool and things like that. And then when it comes to the completion of the, checking the completed assessment, we do that through, like a group activity by a compliance professional, and the trainer, and, like an ops manager all working together, that sort of thing. So I think it is interesting that human element was left out of the testing part. The question that came out of this morning was more, does testing actually mean running a trial? And what does that look like? What's the practicalities of that, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, when you've got a trainer cohort to run it through, potentially, that's something, that could happen.
But that's going to be very limited for people who have, there's still a lot of boutique and smaller independent RTOs out there that might have one or two. So that concept, if they don't enable that glossary of terms to come out to clarify that they consider an assessment system is fit for purpose through the use of testing, and testing can be digitally enhanced, appropriate AI, as long as the outcome is actually assigned to a human for their judgment. So that's where there are a number of learner management systems that say they can map an assessment tool, but it's still the human ticking a box. Now, that's just as the same as doing a manual process, if you ask me. It just happens to be on an electronic format on a laptop or on a screen. It's still not analysing the information, which is what Katya is saying. That time is actually quite hard or a long, lengthy process for humans to do. Whereas when you have a system of AI that's built on somebody's understanding of the process and the requirements and all the rest of it to do that part, and the outcome is the person still says, okay, well, if that's what the data is saying, we could fix it like this. So whether you get an expert as part of your validation process to do that, or whether you do it internally, you get your writers of content to do that, that's, I think, available in the standards still. There's enough flexibility of the rectification. And I think that's really interesting too. There's not a lot except in 1.1, and you go down right down towards F, how validation outcomes are used to inform revision of assessment systems. This is the only point in which they're looking at the data. And that's a really basic, lacking in any sort of depth associated with any governance or improvement or anything related to innovation or creativity towards the future. It just is, well, how do the outcomes used to inform the revision? It doesn't say how you're measuring this against any performance indicators that you identified in your governance section or your well-being section, or, there are so many parts of this whole standard that could really be enhanced using that data. And I think they missed the point there. I think they really missed the opportunity for us to say, if you're a quality RTO, you really have a handle on the whole lot, not just doing these basic steps. You can pull it all together and actually make a business grow and have quality outcomes for your industry.
And I think it's the thing I find interesting, and Katya, maybe you can speak to this a bit more, is in the audits that I've participated in the last 18 months, validation has rarely appeared as part of the process. Now, I mean, there's potentially twofold reasons for that. One is because the majority of RTOs that I work with have pretty robust validation processes anyway. We've got long lists of like all the improvements that we've made to our assessment tools and things like that, and therefore there might not have been much of a necessity. But even in other RTO audits that, like where I've reviewed the audit, the assessment, performance assessment reviews and things like that, it doesn't seem to have been a strong point. Yet assessment is obviously, the old 1.8, new 1.3, 1.4 has been the crux of the vet sector for so long. It always interests me to kind of go, you're really, really focused on assessment and the robust quality, sufficiency of the assessment, yet the processes that the RTO have actually going and checking that and determining that themselves and confirming that themselves fall way further down. 1.8 has definitely been first, and then we look at the actual completed assessments of the students under 3.1, and yet 1.9 seems to fall by the wayside. Has that been a similar experience for you, Katya?
In some respects, yes. So in some ways, not for initial registrations, no, they definitely are looking, particularly as I mentioned, anything that's off the shelf. They're wanting to see that by the time you go to actually deliver these qualifications to students, that the system is, you've got a register that is showing that you are going to have them validated. And then for the units that they select during the validation component of that initial registration, they were asking for 2. It's just been updated as of November last year with the new initial registration process to 3 units.
Right.
And they are wanting to see how your validation system will ensure that you're meeting the requirements of the unit and that you're going to use those outcomes to better your systems. But I completely agree with both of you. It's very intertwined with other areas. You look at, industry engagement, part of a key component of that at the very start, before you go to add a training product, is having an industry contact or engagement, someone who is within the industry and understands it, actually help you determine or give advice on what should be included in that qualification, and that then should be used towards your outcomes. That will then push, if there's certain aspects within assessment, or it could be worded differently, that can push through into validation, even the findings outside of terminologies not relevant, whatever that might be. So there's a lot of intertwining different clauses that I think, and it all comes under, continuous improvement, and particularly as they move towards that self-assurance model, it'll definitely become a more apparent in audits. But we have, I think, so that's more of the initial registration. For ongoing audits or performance assessment reviews, and we have seen them request assessment validation. So they've been requesting the access to your validation register, and then from that they're then saying either the last 2 units that were validated on your scope of registration. We haven't seen them though asking for anything where it's a pre-validation or that testing, I suppose, that we're talking about now. It's definitely been more of the validation of assessment judgments. We have had a few auditors that we always tend to know which auditor is going to request it. There's a few in particular that have requested the pre-validation component, but there's only 2 that I can think of off my head, and I won't name them here. And they've been nice and learned things off them, but yes, we all know how we feel about them. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix. We've been seeing it, and this comes to the inconsistency too between auditors or between practices. And I think that's where, if they really define and give more guidance in the draft standards or the new standards, and have like really defined so that RTOs are aware, but then also auditors are aware, okay, well, this is what that clause means. This is what I need to request. This is what I need to ask for. We might see more consistency come through in those requests too.
I think throughout this year, hopefully, I mean, ASQA has said they're using this year to test, to test out the new standards, to see what that looks like, to develop all the educational tools around that, like like the RTO Standards guide and the examples and everything like that. And hopefully the credential policy will come out, the new RTO Standards guide will come out. Ideally there will be a fairly robust, system of definitions in there, because there's just so many words. The first time I read the standards, the first thing that jumped out at me was like, I want a definition of that. 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 There was like 50 times that I had highlighted and scribbled all over. What does this mean? How will this be interpreted? What is this going to look like? And I was like, this just screams out, this is going to be the word that gets audited, like it's the new sufficient.
And they definitely have got better. Like, they have provided a lot more guidance. Like, I'm loving their guides that they're releasing. They had the Spotlight On series. They've definitely shifting towards a more educative approach, and you can really see that in the requests that are now starting to come through. They are a lot more streamlined. But yeah, I still think that it's a continuous improvement for them. They've got to self-assure and provide guidance internally for
I think it's interesting when you were mentioning about industry, and then Lauren, when you were talking about people who are testing, I want to know who is doing the testing for them. And I want to know, when they're talking about industry, it's popped into training specifically rather than assessment. So it's like, okay, training packages were meant to be developed by industry for industry, and we're still going back to industry and saying, which ones do you want? It's like, I'm a bit confused. Haven't you already done that?
Like, let's be honest. This is one of the big problems that we have, is that units have not, there is no way half these units have actually been reviewed by a person from industry who does that particular job. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, they're saying they are.
So overzealous.
Yeah, they just, but they don't. Actually, look, to be fair, I will play devil's advocate on this one. They don't get paid to be able to actually do that. The amount of money that they got paid to transition over to streamline units of competency, there was a reason why so many of those units came out basically with just nothing other than a formatting change. And that is because the amount of money that was allocated to those projects was absolutely not sufficient to actually go out and do significant consultation. CHC did it, CHC and HLT did it because they were like, if we're going to do this, we're going to go and do it properly. And they kind of did it off their own backs, but nobody was funded to actually be able to do that. And that was definitely one of the problems. All right, we're going to move on to another subject, but we're going to take a really quick break first, guys. This is our RTO Roundtable series. If you want to follow this whole playlist, it will be linked here, 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 or here. I don't know where, that's not my bag. And I'm lucky enough to be here with Vanessa and Katya. We will be back in about 5 minutes, but we will see you guys in another 3 days when we release a new video. You can find all of Vanessa and Katya's information, including how to follow them on Facebook or reach out to their companies if you go into the comments section below. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you in just a minute. My name is Lauren Hollis for NOI Education Services.